This is the Stacking Days Podcast, the podcast about the healing experience of recovery for people of color by people of color. This show is for the purpose of education and connection and is not a replacement for therapy or recovery care. We suggest you seek out the support of a trained professional for guidance with your specific circumstance. I'm your host, Ray Donovan, and I've been alcohol-free since September 2021. Welcome to the show. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Stacking Days podcast. This is Ray Donovan coming at you. And today we have a fantastic guest. And I feel like, this is the third episode in, and I just continually am blessed by the women who are participating thus far in the podcast. And so excited to have this conversation today. We have Fawna Asfaw with us today. She is a powerhouse in the sobriety space. She stems and hails from California, LA to be exact. I'm going to hand the mic over to her in a second to give a brief introduction, and we'll jump into it. But I just wanted to preface this by saying that, she's got a whole bunch of tools, a whole bunch of gold to be able to share with the community. And I'm just really excited by the fact that she's here on the Stacking Days podcast to share some with us. So Fawna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. And also, I'm just very, very, very inspired by what you're doing. And I think it's so needed. So thank you again. Happy to be here. Yes, I am in LA. I am a author of Sober Daughter. It's like a time capsule piece of what it looks like to kind of understand addiction, go through addiction, get through to the other side of addiction. Lots of tools. I'm obsessed with tools. I think that's what, really makes or breaks it. I'm a recovery coach. I'm also an addiction counselor and a creator of lots of things and in community. And just, sobriety was my gift. And I am just obsessed with helping others get through their goals in sobriety, because I think it's one of the most transformational just shifts that anyone can do when they're really struggling. It's just a huge sacrifice that also gives such big rewards. So any way I can help, I am here for
awesome. That. And I'll just say this: I just finished your book. I was saying before the show here last night, and that's only because I didn't get the book on the date that I was hoping to. So it took me, it ate into how long, I had to finish it. But, Fawna's got such a powerful story, so many aspects of her story. I'm sure that we'll find, pieces in that to relate. I know that I did. And then also I think that, Fawna's lived a unique life where it really is her story. So, with that being said, and, would you just kind of give us maybe, the Cliff Notes version of your story in about 10 minutes or so, kind of, where you came from, what really kind of brought you into that space of addiction, what were some of the challenges? And I think it's really important for you to be able to share that with the audience. And then, and then we'll get into, what that bridge looked like for you. And how you got to that bridge of transitioning out of that very, very dark space.
Absolutely. Yes, very, very dark space. I think one of the things that people have always told me after reading my book that they relate most to is the feelings. Because a lot of times in sobriety or, at the beginning, it's very hard to kind of pinpoint what's going on and what you're experiencing because it's new to you. And also there's not a lot of language that's tossed around. So I think the feelings is what I really like to kind of go with, because that seems to be what people have come up to me and they're like, I felt like that. Mm-hmm. I don't have your exact story, but I felt what you felt. And I'm a big feeler. Okay. I think that's what predominantly goes over, that I knew since I was very young was I have big emotions. I feel things really, really intensely. My feelings could completely overwhelm me. And when I was young, no matter what was going on around me, I always felt like I was kind of in this weird bubble by myself, me and my brain and my feelings. And no, I could, if whether I wanted the feelings to stop or my brain to shut off, I had no control over that. And so I learned how to kind of escape into my own world as a really young kid. I'm an only child, and I am born and raised in Los Angeles, Hollywood, actually, which is bizarre to a lot of people. And but there's two sides to Hollywood. There's a side that people actually did grow up in, which was mine. Then there's the glitz and glamour side, and that's not what I'm talking about. I was born to an immigrant father. He was from Ethiopia, and he came here in like the late 60s and met my mother. She was African American, a lot of mixed heritage in her background as well, Native American, white, all these things. So I was very much raised from my dad's traditional standpoint as an Ethiopian daughter. He brought a lot of his culture back. He was very tied to his country. And both my parents met because they were activists. So I grew up in this space of, we show up for other people, we fight for other people. The greater good is always what's most important. So I didn't really have a sense of like self. And to add on to that, I loved escapism. So I loved to, hide in my room. I loved to do all these kind of singular solo activities. And all of that to say was that I was kind of primed for anything that would make me float away into fantasy and not be present. My family was wonderful. My mother and father, it was just us three. I was raised in a very loving home. They were, they always took care of everything we needed. We were very, very close. I came to learn that we were codependently close. Didn't know those words when I was young. But it was kind of the three of us against the world trying to, help. And I was always at their fundraisers, at their marches, at their book drives. And they were also educators. So it was just a lot of, outward things. And I remember when I was young, I would want to be like my friends who I went to school with, who were just a little bit more carefree. I never had a very carefree existence. Like I always had something bigger looming over my head. Like, oh my God, there's a war in Ethiopia. Oh my God, we have to get books up for kids in school. Oh my God, we have to help Cesar Chavez march on the farmlands, like all these things. And so when I was young, I met friends and I was like, okay, I want to just something light and easy. And I remember I went to a party and it was a 21-year-old and I think I'm 15, 16. And I had my first drink. And mind you, there's no alcohol in my house. My parents did not drink. Maybe they drank in their past life before me, but I never had alcohol in the house, never saw it. No parties with alcohol.
You didn't know what you were getting into.
I had no idea, but I found it. And I knew that it was something I liked. And I remember taking the first gulp, not a sip, gulp. And I was just off to the races. Like it was instantaneous for me. I blacked out, my first drink ever, blacked out, passed out, puked everywhere, had to be dragged out by my friends. And that was never a deterrent. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I'm down. I'm so down because at home it's really tight and it's really heavy and it's just a lot. And when I'm not there and I'm drinking, it's light, it's fun. And I felt that like, this calmness over my mind, over my brain, over everything that just felt really uncomfortable for me. Like life was uncomfortable. And so that carried on as a normal person, I thought, drinking like my friends and just going to parties and doing all this kinds of stuff. And I imagined that it was going to just be a party fun thing, and everyone's getting ready to go to college, and, we were ending high school. And this is when my trajectory shifted from my friends who were just drinking and partying for fun, but still getting ready to go off to college and do all these things. I found out that my dad, my father, had been battling leukemia for years, and hid it from me. And traditionally, that makes sense to people from my Ethiopian culture. They're like, well, he just wanted to protect you. He didn't want you to know. But I'm an Americanized kid, and I'm sitting here, like, well, we don't keep secrets, and like, what's going on? And I was furious, and I was so mad, and I just remembered that I had this thing that whenever I'm furious, whenever I'm mad, whenever I'm pissed, it makes it go away. And my drinking started to kind of become not with friends, not with other people. And then I found out that my dad's leukemia was terminal, and that he only had about a year. And I had nowhere to take this to because, my friends were, all going off to college, and it was just me and my mom and my dad. And I ended up being his nurse at the house because I was the only daughter, and also culturally that just is what we do. And my mom had to pick up a million teaching things and, cover bills. So I was just at the house doing unspeakable caregiving things that, completely just broke me inside, because my dad was like this big person and this egg protector and this man, and now he's frail and he's dying, and I'm taking care of him, and end of life hospice. This is end of life. It's not for the faint of heart. But I drank, and I drank at night, and I drank by myself, and I drank to go to sleep. I couldn't sleep without passing out, and I didn't know that that's what a blackout drinker meant. I thought that was like the person who's at the bar and they're like, and then they just go like cut to and they're, in the alleyway.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's literally just when you you drink to the point where all cognitive function is
turned off.
Yep. And I did that every single night. And I thought that's like, oh, this is how I sleep. And so then my father didn't make it, and his death hit me really hard. Again, I had nowhere to put that, so I put it in a bottle, and then it progressed into me and my mom absolutely dysfunctionally, codependently enmeshed, trying to make sense of what happened, but not talking. Like, no actual... like, let's discuss, let's process, let's go to therapy, let's go to cancer support group, none of that.
I mean, you're both in shock at this point from what I've, gathered and just reading the story. I just couldn't even imagine being in the house. And you talked about feelings earlier. I could feel that, in how you, kind of describe that re-entry into life without your dad, with your mom, and how lonely that was probably for you both individually, and you more specifically for sure. Yeah,
it was very lonely. And she maladaptively coped by, overeating. My mom was a food addict and shopping, online shopping. And I was drinking, and neither one of us would ever discuss what was going on. That was just our way. And then just as my dad, it happened to my mom, and my mom fell terminally ill and also hid what the doctors had told her. And it just felt like this betrayal, this hurt, this pain. It was just, I couldn't believe it, So I ended up hospicing my mom in the same house, in the same room that I hospiced my dad in. And my mom didn't make it. And I fought really hard to try and save, because I said mentally, I'm like, if I can't save my dad, I'm going to save my mom. And that, who am I? I'm not God. And I when she did not make it, I lost any footing or semblance of a connection to this world. And I said, I didn't know at the time, but I said to myself, I have nothing left holding me to a sense of duty or whatever. And I'm going to drink how I want to drink. And how I want to drink is suicidal. I do not drink for fun, for pleasure, for any of that. That ended when I was 15.
Right.
I drank for a purpose, to check out, to numb myself, to hurt myself. And with nothing else holding me back, I mean, I locked myself in that house where both my parents died. And I drank and I drank and I drank myself into full alcoholic psychosis, full DTs. I was having seizures. I hadn't eaten in weeks. I hadn't spoke to anybody. My phone was just for pretending to look at stuff online. And I was broken, and I was hoping to die, and I was trying to be with my parents because I didn't understand the world, and I didn't have the tools. I spent all my life catering to and codependently, are they okay? Are we okay? Or is this all right? Is this okay? I never once learned how to just be on my own and navigate myself, which a lot of people who have alcoholism or addiction, our coping mechanisms, our sense of self-identity, our emotional regulation, our sense of self and where we're our strengths and weaknesses, it's all browned out. And it ends, it's like short-circuited and stopped when we really kind of picked up.
Yeah.
So I felt like a little kid. I felt like I was 15 alone with no family.
Just flailing, I'm assuming.
Just is the most terrifying thing I've ever felt, because I also knew I could not stop drinking.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I physically couldn't. I could not stop myself because one, I was already past the point, so now I'm dependent. So I can't even wake up or hold my hands or, I know a lot of people don't know DTs, or they experience the tremors and the shaking, when your body has withdrawn overnight. And I actually thought I had diabetes, because nothing in my mind was like, oh, you're an alcoholic and you're shaking. I was like, oh, my blood sugar's low.
Right. I need a Snickers bar or something like that.
Like everything else in the world, but please don't let me be an alcoholic. But of course I am. And thankfully, I had my biggest blowout. I had a huge seizure, and I crashed into stuff in my house, and just there was this big commotion, and somebody found my neighbor, and somebody found me and called my best friends. And the one thing I do have is I have my oldest childhood friends, and they're still my friends to this day. And so they knew, they came, they picked me up. They said, Fawna, you are going through stuff that none of us can relate to, and none of us can help. And that space of honesty, which is what we really practice when you have another alcoholic helping another alcoholic, is we're not sugarcoating it. We're giving you a message of depth and weight. And when somebody said to me oh, I don't know what the hell is happening to you. I've not been through this. I don't know what this is, but you're dying. And when I heard it, there's someone in a way that wasn't just go to yoga or
sure,
you're dying. I said yes, and my friends pulled together and sent me to a treatment center in Utah.
Whew. Fawna. That's deep.
Wild.
That's deep. I mean, hearing you, recount the story, even in the way that you just did, right? There's so many more details, a lot of which are in the book. and a lot of which I've also heard you speak about on other podcasts as well. So if you're interested in really learning more about, Fawna's story, there are places where you can do that. But we talked about feelings earlier. I mean, you can feel where you were coming from just in your recount of that. I mean, it's funny because, I'm a dad, right? So I'm almost, I have got a 4-year-old, I got a 2-year-old,
Right.
and I'm on the opposite side. And I'm thinking to myself, how I would feel if I had to leave my children the way that your dad did or the way your mom did, and also how frightening that probably was for them, in just trying to manage their last days, and how difficult that must have been for them. But then on the flip side for you, once they're gone, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, and how old were you at the time? You're 30 or so when your mother passed.
Yeah.
What it would, the degree of what that loneliness and that cloud must have felt like for you. I think that would have been unbearable for most. So, I mean, I'm so happy that your friends came to you with with that truth, and, pulled together their support financially and emotionally and all of that for you to get you to a place where you could begin that journey of recovery. But you obviously know that you have angels sitting on your shoulders, because, most people would not even have gotten to that point, right?
Yeah.
They wouldn't even have gotten to that point. So I just think that you're an extremely, extremely strong person for, even being able to deal with that pressure and that, that degree of poison,
Yes. Yeah. It's
I mean, we're on a podcast, is, part of my role here is to speak, but sometimes when I hear stuff like that, I don't even have the words to kind of get into what it actually makes one feel.
Yeah, thank you for that too. I think that's part of what you really get when you read the book, is really what I was doing to myself, and how dark and how terrified I felt, to be stripped of everything and everyone you have, and I felt so hauntingly alone.
Yeah.
And I know that even if you have a big family or you have all these things, I know so many people that feel hauntingly alone because they're keeping secrets. They're keeping these big secrets. And that's part of why I wrote the book, is because my parents created this legacy of keeping secrets, and I am breaking that by telling the story, because the only thing that saved me was my friends calling me out on my shit and saying, you can't keep this secret. It's killing you, And there's so many people that, have to hide what's they're going through this pain that is unbearable, but they won't tell anybody about it. And they're just suffering in silence. And a lot of us don't make it.
Yeah.
A lot of us don't make it, and we have to talk about it, and we have to make space for people to say really weird, dark stuff, because everything is not all roses. But when you get to walk through something, that's when it's now coming through on the other side, I'm able to see wow, what an incredible experience it turns into. Mm-hmm. But if I had just sat by myself and kept that there, I would have died in that house. There's no doubt about it. And I think community and being transparent and being honest really keep us alive.
Yeah, that's all. Those are all, no truer words for sure have been spoken, at least, that I've heard in a little while. So thank you for that. Something that I also was thinking about is the inability to kind of speak and be vulnerable and communicate your truth, even to those who, are closest to you, whether they be friends, whether they be family members. There's this misplaced notion that, at least for me, that the reason why I keep it all in is almost like I'm a firewall for them, and I'm trying to also protect them from, from feeling some of the things that I'm feeling, or having to deal with some of the stuff that I'm dealing with, and it's so counterproductive, and it's corrosive at the same time, where it just continues to eat you away. And that's when you're not drinking. Like, forget about that. Like,
Yeah.
when you add in the alcohol, that in itself it is corrosive. It's such a debilitating combination. And kind of cycle for one to get into. But I mean, again, you push through with the help of people that love you, which I think is, fantastic. I think it's super important that you were able to listen to them too, right? Like, I feel like also sometimes,
Yeah.
as like addicts and people who are dealing with abuse is of substances, they don't hear, they don't want to listen.
Right.
They just want to shut it out. I'm like, I don't have a problem. Like, I'm good. I'm grieving right now. I can, I can
Yeah.
be in my house doing what I'm doing. But I'm very happy that, you heard them for what they were saying, and you found yourself, in Utah. And it sounds as though that you actually found yourself in Utah,
No,
because
yeah.
in reading the story, I got the sense that you basically like left LA, got to Utah, and there was a gap in time when you didn't know what was going on. So let's talk about, that you entering into that bridge, ultimately to your salvation, and that time that you spent, in Utah, because that's just as impactful as everything that you've spoken about up until this point.
Yes, thank you. I did magically show up in Utah because I had no recollection of leaving LA, getting on a plane. I don't remember any of it. I still to this day don't. Um, I thank God had friends who came, packed my bag with me, literally got me on the plane, flew with me, because that's how sick I was. And I really want to stress the word that it's sick. It's not a choice. It's not all these things. I'm sick. I had a sickness, and I needed medical attention. But yeah, I did. This is put it in perspective. We go into detail in the book, day by day, of what this looked like. But I was in what they call detox, which is a medically overseen withdrawal. And it's typically 2 to 3 days tops. I was there for 10. And I didn't realize any of this, or that I was in Utah, or that any of this happened, or that my parents had died until day 10. So I was extremely far gone. I was in full psychosis. I've had stage 2 wet brain. I was hallucinating. I was incoherent. I could not understand. My body just said, we're going to take her from reality and protect her. And they actually prepared for me to go to the psychiatric hospital, which was next door, because I wasn't fit to be in the substance center. And I went through a wild goose chase and detox, and met friends that weren't there, and met animals that weren't there. And it was a really wild time. And somehow magically, on that 10th day, a nurse was talking to me, and I just clicked, and I just literally came back into my body. And I remember the nurse saying, "Fawna?" And I said, "Yeah." And she's like, "Can you hear me? Do you understand me?" I was like, "Yeah, why are you doing this? Why?" And in my mind, I'm like, "Why are you being so dramatic?" Like, yes, I'm here.
But
And
where else would I be? You don't see me?
yeah. And to this day, they still talk about my case.
Really?
Yeah, because no one has ever come back. I mean, I was a write-off. I was a total, she's going to be kind of padded room for her life.
You mentioned in the book, and maybe we can give the audience some clarification on this term, wet brain, right? And you mentioned in the book that you were stage 2,
Yeah.
right, of wet brain, which, as and I didn't even know this, and I don't think a lot of people know this. First of all, I don't think a lot of people know what wet brain is, just generally speaking, if they're like in the kind of grasp of this substance. And then number 2, recognizing the stages of it. And you basically were at a stage of wet brain that folks just don't come back from. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely. There are three, but mostly two stages. And the first is typically, it's kind of the dissociation. It's a little bit of checking in, checking out, not remembering things completely. But when there's been significant impairment on the brain, it is interfering with the person's entire physical function. So it's a consequence of abusing alcohol. So there's so many things I want to preface with this, but one is stage 2 typically is irreversible. You have lost, motor skills, memory loss, complete kind of ways to relate in reality. You're almost, in a layman's way to say, is you're checked out. Mm-hmm. And so they do a lot of like thiamine and like vitamin treatments to try and like revitalize the brain and like do all these things. But it's typically, once you're that far gone, it's irreversible. But what I really wanted to like preface was this is from alcohol abuse. So many people talk about addiction and they're thinking, they see the movies and they're like, heroin withdrawal. They're like, oh, she's shaking, she's crazy, and all this and all that. And heroin must be the craziest thing. And alcohol is the most dangerous withdrawal that there is.
Yeah.
Alcohol is the one. Heroin withdrawal, you will feel like you're dying. Like you will literally feel like your skin's itching and crawling and all these things. Alcohol, you can die. So people, it's legal. People are like, oh, it's fine. It's not a big deal. I think that's one of the huge roadblocks into sobriety is they don't understand alcohol is so destructive. And you can, and a lot of times people do die from withdrawal. So you cannot do it alone. I mean, there's no, shoulda, woulda, people do and do what they want to do. But ideally, you are going to be under medical supervision because an alcohol withdrawal is very serious.
Yeah. I mean, you think about how intensely detrimental alcohol must be that you will die from not having it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh man.
You will. It's so serious and dangerous. And it's so pervasive because when you're taking something on a daily basis, and sometimes people take it morning, noon, and night, and you're constantly in this state of, flooding your body with alcohol, you can't just stop without some medical attention. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that distinction for folks to make sure that they're keeping that in mind if when considering their own potential first step in their journey. So we're in Utah. You are you now have been. I'm assuming you're seeing doctors. You're seeing psychiatrists. Mm-hmm. You're in programs and programming, and ultimately you spent, was it 90 days in Utah all in?
A little over
90 days.
Yeah.
What were some of the turning points for you in those 90 days? I mean, you effectively were a broken person walking into those doors, and and have came a long way in that time. And I think that it sounds like also in the period of that time, you're waking up, you're recognizing things, you're in a better place to be able to accept the help. What were some of the pivotal milestones that you were able to embark on in those 90 days?
Oh, wow. So many. I remember this part vividly because it was work. It was not easy for me. I think one of my first successes was being able to not have to use the handicap elevator because I couldn't walk. I couldn't make it up a flight of stairs. My muscles had atrophied. I was silly putty. My brain, my body, and my emotions, everything was silly putty. And I had to have everyone's help. And going from someone who refused to ask for help, refused to talk about what was going on, all these things. I got to be like, can you help me up the stairs? Can you hold the door? Like, what did she say? Where am I going? And I was so vulnerable. But it was the first time I ever felt like I could ask for help. I want to like validate, the a lot of people who grow up in homes where they don't have really healthy dynamics with their family. There isn't always a time or a space to ask for help. And that's really hurtful. And so I grew up where the roles were reversed. I was the parent the majority of my life. So I didn't have very many opportunities to ask for help. So I turned into this. Once I started getting my bearings, I was like asking for help to everybody because I was kind of, thrilled that, there was a place that helps you. I didn't know that. I didn't even know treatment existed. I didn't know recovery existed. I didn't know, and this world was so new to me. And again, why I wrote the book was because I was walking around my jaw on the floor like, oh my God, I can ask you to help me and to like explain what's going on with me and like, kind of just hold space for me and let me grieve. It was all so new. I was like a deer in headlights. And I think that's what gave me such a huge leg up was I soaked it all up. I didn't have one bone of resistance in my body because I never was given these things, and I wanted to give it back. So I started walking around a little notepad, and they would make fun of me because everything they said to me, I was like, wait, what was that word? What am I experiencing? Oh, okay. What? And I knew in some way I wanted to give back what I was learning, because if it was new to me and I've seen some things, I knew it had to be almost out of reach for so many other people. And, like therapy, I've never been to therapy before in my life until I went to treatment. I'd never did trauma work. Didn't even know what trauma work was. I did amazing therapeutic modalities like brain spotting and EMDR and just like really cutting edge, really innovative, but also effective ways to help somebody navigate trauma that they've repressed and they've, unable, like that's what happened was I could not process the trauma. It was too big. No, these are all things I learned while I was in Utah, and I also learned about support groups, and I also learned about, outside programs. And I learned about just, so many resources. And then I, fell in love with it and then actually started working in it later.
That's awesome. I mean, so you're in this intensive, 90 days. That seems like so many, emotional, mental, physical hurdles for one to have to push through in such a short amount of time. But you did it, and I think that's amazing. Obviously, I would have been so afraid of walking back into the real world after having left that experience.
Oh my God.
Having it's very much structured. It's removed from that life that you were trying to escape from in the first place, and then you kind of have to move back into the world, and to the words that you use is kind of like manage that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, you've fallen in love now with recovery, and you know that this is a part of where you want to be spending some of your efforts, your time. Can you talk a little bit about what that transition back in was? What continued to motivate you, intrinsically in that period of your early stages? And what were some of the tools that you used once you kind of re-entered and you were a little bit more stable than, say, 3 months previous that you really held to?
Yes. Well, I did this. Walking back out of what they call the bubble is really, really difficult. And what somehow, again, I listened to my friends, and I listened to people that had my best interests at heart. And I didn't go home. I mean, I didn't have a home to go to, but like, I didn't just like jump out and go back into LA. I went to, what they call extended care and then sober living. So essentially, I was in treatment for 9 months.
Okay.
Which is what I recommend to every single person who has the availability and Medicare now, helps with this. But it's too hard to go through an intensive treatment. 90, some people only do 30 days. And 30 days, I was just understanding what my name was and like what was going on at 30 days. And so 90 days, I was terrified. I said, I don't even know what outside is or how to be sober. I've never been sober since I was 15. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to, I felt like I was raw. And, so I did do, extended treatment, which I put in the book, but it's just, more and more of putting my self-care first and F the rest, essentially. That's what I did. I just said, okay, guys, like what is the safest way for me to be? Because I don't know this world. So I did that. I also started attending the outside groups that they have all over the world. I got a mentor that I worked with outside of, where I lived in the communal environment. I mean, I was a grown ass woman bunking with a little 18-year-old, okay, doing dishes and mopping floors for 9 months. And I did not care. I did not care because I just didn't know what I was doing and I needed help. And so again, somehow I asked for help. And some of the things I learned, there's so many tools, but essentially the first thing I learned is like my sobriety is not guaranteed. Not guaranteed. My sobriety can go away at any moment, and I have to hold it like this, like a little ember in my hands, and I have to protect it, and I have to put it first. It comes first, because whatever I put in front of my sobriety, I will lose, because if I'm not sober, I can't have it. So when I had that reframe, everything else kind of I would put into like two categories. Like, is this gonna freak me out and make me drink, or is this gonna hinder my sobriety, or is this really healthy for my sobriety? And I just would do everything that fell into the latter, and that meant I built a really big community, a circle of girlfriends that were in sobriety, that were new in sobriety, and we did everything together. And that's awesome. At 30-something, making new friends, that's terrifying. But again, it's like my sobriety comes first. So I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I cannot let this little fire go out. So will you be my friend? And can we go do sober things together? Great. And, it just was more and more of walking through all these things. And what it really is we're reparenting ourselves. Yeah. It feels like the most awkward, stupid, dorkiest things, but what we're doing is we're reparenting ourselves in a safe way, where we're asking for help, where we're being honest, where we're being vulnerable, we're choosing our health first, we're choosing our self-care first, we're like stepping out in fear, we're doing all these things. But if you do it in an environment with people that are doing the same things as you, it makes it so much easier. So I say, have a sober tribe, a crew, a little group, a friend, something. You need someone who can relate to what you're going through, because you feel like an alien for a little bit.
I'm sure and you've been sober now for how long?
About to be 4 years.
4 years. Do you still feel like an alien sometimes?
Not anymore. But for sure, the first year for me was pure survival. Like my body was changing, my brain my emotion. I would be crying in the morning, laughing by noon. It was all, and what it is your body's recalibrating. So all your levels are rebalancing out because you've been chemically imbalanced for years. So the main thing you want to do is just self-care, self-care, self-care. And so frozen yogurt, my best friend. I lived at Yogurtland. I got a dog.
Nice.
Just like all the things that make you feel good, I did. Like walk a
Those are all healthy things in the grand scheme of things, right? Like,
yeah, but
I
never.
probably ate more apple pies in like my first year. More apple pies. I mean, I'm the only one in my house that eats apple pies, and I would purchase them and have a huge slice every night with 2 huge scoops of vanilla ice cream on top. So
it's a must, though. Sugar is a must because our body's craving. We are removing the liquid sugar we've had for decades.
Yep.
And so you need the sugar. Eat the sugar.
Eat it. Eat it all.
Eat it all. Happy and healthy. I mean, and then you recalibrate, and then you're like not eating a pie at night, but
exactly.
At the beginning, it might be.
Oh man. I wanted to just call out just really quickly as we kind of like bringing the plane in for a landing here. So much of your story was obviously your friends, being supportive of you, and protecting you, and also probably holding that ember for you a little bit as well. But there was also, from what I can read and have been able to tell, many women who have stepped in and have played, significant roles in your journey and your story and supporting and protecting you, which I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, ultimately plays into a lot of the work that you're doing today, right? In reaching back into the community, whether it be of women, whether it be, women of color. But I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you're up to these days, how you kind of reaching back and pulling others up and giving them that support that, that so many, folks were able to do for you in some of your more challenging times.
Oh, yeah. I mean, women saved me. Women held me up, carried me through, gave me space, gave me love. And I have amazing men that I know. But when you're in early sobriety, one of the best things, safety and just nourishment, is to be around women when I'm a woman. And I've heard from men is for them to be around men, that are elders to them or brothers to them, or, just really, really, really there, because and when I say women, I mean, female and female identifying. It doesn't have to be gender controlled, but there were just so many women that I just poured my heart out into. And I knew it was nothing other than, we're two women trying to help each other and save each other and show up for each other. And there are women that's why I love recovery, is the more time that they get, the more tools that they have, they're passing it down, and it becomes this lineage. And that's what attracted me the most was, the sharing of knowledge, this community, this kind of selflessness that's also in a way to help you be selfish, almost, if that makes sense.
Help you selfish. Yeah, I get it.
To teach you how to put yourself first, and, to know that to put yourself first in a healthy way. And so, women just showed up for me. And so I just knew that my calling was to, help the women after me and the girls underneath, who have a few days. And so I fell in love with recovery, and I started as just giving back to the spaces that I was a part of. And that just kept fueling my soul. And then I went back to school. It's separate because I have an English degree because I'm a writer as well. But the passion part was really what was ignited. So I went back to school for licensing addiction counseling. So now I have a hodgepodge of these worlds where, I write, I create blogs, and I help women that are, just in the sphere. And then I do one-on-ones, and I run also a dual diagnosis transitional treatment for young women. So I'm in the mix, and I'm just, helping as much as I can, because it inspires me. And when you see the little switch, and when people have their little aha moments or their little breakthroughs, it's like, because you've been there,
Yeah.
you know how special it means when you, like, get your first sober job, or, you handle your first conflict, or you go, mend things with family or your wife or your kids. I mean, it's huge, and it might not be huge to the outside world, but we know how much work that took. And so I just want young women, and, that are women anywhere, especially of color, who don't have representation, they don't have spaces, they don't have access, they don't have the same, entry level as privileged kids with rich parents who have known that this is what you do for quite some time, actually.
Yeah.
You send your kids off to treatment. I wanted to pack as much in as I can in my own ways, whether it's through my book, whether it's through my coaching, whether it's through one-on-one with me, or you're in one of the houses that I run, or, your whatever. It's just, recovery is such a magical thing, and it can translate into so many other spaces. And yeah, I'm just very thrilled that this is where everything took me.
That's fantastic. Where can folks find you if they're looking to learn more about what you do, particularly if they're in California, for example, or in LA, or if they want to learn more about where you're at? Where would you send somebody?
To my website, fawnaasfaw.com. And also on all socials, I do a lot of posts, a lot of like early tips, a lot of fun stuff, at Fawna Asfaw, on all socials. And yeah, I just think that the more of us that do this and connect with each other, there's a huge wave coming, and there's a huge wave of people that are searching and so thirsty for wellness. And it's, if you're struggling, if you need any help, if you're interested, if you're curious, find someone that has tools that they can offer, and spaces that you can enter, because it's your time. Like, it's time to get well.
Yeah, you somewhat answered one of the two questions that they want to close out our conversation with. So I'll ask you the one that you didn't kind of answer, and then I'll ask you the one that you kind of did answer.
That,
Secondly, so the first question is, I mean, and this, we're going to take this all the way back to when you were kind of in some of the darker days, right? And and this may not necessarily even have anything to do with your drinking, but maybe even more so kind of the space that you were in at the time when you were hospicing your father or hospicing your mother. And obviously your friends ultimately came to your side and your support when it was probably the last kind of rodeo for them to be able to
yeah,
do that.
yeah.
My question for you is, how would your friends or anyone who was around you that might have been close to you at the time have known that you weren't okay?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think it's really following your intuition and your gut. A lot of times I think we get in this space, we're like, oh, she's probably just busy, or she's, no. And we're just like, we're so in this space of like, let's get to the next, that we don't really kind of sit there and think for a second, like, I haven't heard from, my friend in like 2 weeks. And she
Yeah.
usually, like, start getting curious about your friends, and um, don't keep it all so surface. You don't need to have answers. You don't need to have solution. That's the best thing my friends did. They didn't have answers and solutions. They came to me and said, what's wrong? Something's wrong. And that let me let my guard down.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, thank God. Like you
I don't have to bear this thing on my own anymore.
yeah, like call out the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
It's like, and if that's actually your friend, I think and something's up. And it could be simple as asking an open-ended question instead of just being like, you good?
Right.
Just being like, where are you at right now? Like, what's coming up for you? Start getting curious about your relationships, because to me, and I think I've been this way my entire life, but it's become more pronounced, is I believe in friendship. I really believe in friendship because so many aspects of life come and go. But if you build and nurture your friendships, and you don't need 17, 18, if you nurture a couple of friendships, those are people that love you and care for you and see a side of you that maybe family won't, or, a significant other won't. And so I really think, be there for people, ask real questions, like get curious and get uncomfortable. I'm sure they were so uncomfortable to have an intervention with me. That was terrifying for them, but they walked through their own fear because they cared about me.
Yeah. That's powerful, man. I don't know your friends, but they sound like fantastic people. So, who knows? Maybe I'm in LA one day. We'll bump into each other.
Oh yeah, we'd love that. Love that.
Last question, and then get you out of here.
I'm loving this though. So
Me too. But I do know you want to get out of here. No, just kidding. So, last question. You alluded to this. For someone who's sitting there listening, they're recognizing that, in their heart of hearts, they have an issue that they know that they need to address. They don't necessarily know what's the first step. What do I do? To kind of address, this elephant in my own room. What would your advice be to them? What would be the baby step?
I liked your answer, actually. I liked that you said, get curious and start seeking out people that are going through or have been through what you're experiencing. I think that's the most important thing. I don't think when you actually truly have, a substance issue or disease of addiction, that you really truly hear your own self in people that do not experience it.
Yeah.
So, I would say seek out, if you know somebody who's ever said they were sober, call them. If you know somebody who ever said that they've been in recovery, call them. If you don't have anybody that you've ever known that was sober and you have a friend or somebody that you can trust that can hold space for you, tell them. The biggest thing is to tell on yourself, because the sickness wants us to be quiet. It wants us to suffer alone, so we keep drinking. So when you start speaking your truth and saying, oh my God, this feels like something might be up, you're planting a seed. It might not mean you get sober that moment. It might not mean you recovered immediately, but you start planting a seed that you want something different, and that blossoms.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, just opening up the space, opens up the possibility of what comes from that space, right? And you're empowered to be able to do that for yourself. Man, Fawna, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I really do appreciate the conversation. I'll obviously put all of the necessaries in the show notes. I definitely want folks to come find you if they need to. And, and look, you all need to get this book too. It's on Amazon. I purchased it off of, I think I just did it off like an iBook. So I just read the digital version, which was good too. So, please read the story and yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate you. And, everything that you've gone through to basically share back into the world. I know that you're changing lives and, I feel that. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure, and you're doing important work. So I'm really happy to be a part of this.
Awesome. All right, guys, I'm going to sign off. We'll talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to the Stack and Days podcast. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, email me at rdg@stackingdays.com or follow us on Instagram at stackingdays. If you like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, and by all means, share it with a friend who you think needs to be invited into the conversation. Until we meet again, be well, one day at a time.